Jake Martinez stepped carefully through the thick green plants that covered the forest floor. His boots made soft sounds on the wet leaves as he moved deeper into the alien jungle. The air felt heavy and warm against his skin, strange bird-like. Creatures called from the tall trees above him. He was supposed to collect plant samples for the science team back on the ship. The planet Kepler 442b had many new types of life that humans had never seen before. Jake loved his job as a xenobiologist. Every day brought new discoveries about how life could grow in different worlds. The scanner in his hand beeped softly. It showed that something interesting was nearby. Jake pushed through a wall of hanging vines and found himself in a small clearing. Sunlight came down through the leaves in golden beams. That was when he heard the sound dot. It was a low whimper, like an animal in pain. Jake stopped and listened. The sound came again, weaker this time. He followed it to a large fallen tree trunk covered in moss. Behind the log, Jake found something that made his heart race. A girl lay on the ground, but she was not human. Her skin had a pale blue color with small silver scales that caught the light. Long white hair spread around her head like spilled milk. She had ears that pointed upward like a cat, and Jake could see sharp teeth when her mouth opened to breathe. Blood covered her left side, where deep cuts went through what looked like leather clothing. Her right leg bent at a wrong angle. She was breathing, but very slowly. Jake's training told him to call the ship right away. First contact with alien life was supposed to follow strict rules. But the girl was hurt badly. She might die if he waited for help to arrive. He knelt down beside her and opened his medical kit. His hands shook a little as he took out bandages and antiseptic. The girl's skin felt warm under his fingers as he checked her wounds. The cuts were deep but clean. Something with very sharp claws had attacked her. Jake cleaned the wounds as gently as he could. The girl made small sounds of pain, but did not wake up. When he moved her leg to check the break, her eyes suddenly opened. They glowed like yellow fire in the dim light. Jake froze as those strange eyes stared at him. The girl tried to sit up fast, but pain made her fall back down. She said something in a language Jake had never heard. It sounded like music mixed with growling. Her voice was beautiful but dangerous. "It's okay," Jake said softly. "I'm trying to help you." The girl's eyes went wide. She looked at Jake like he was something impossible. Then she noticed the bandages on her wounds and the medical supplies in his hands. She said something else in her language. This time, it sounded like a question. Jake wished he could understand her. "I found you hurt," he said, pointing to her wounds. "I want to help." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then something strange happened. Her pale blue cheeks turned darker, almost purple. At the same time, a low growling sound came from her throat. Jake was not sure if she was angry or scared. He held up his hands to show he was not dangerous. "I won't hurt you," he said. "Please let me finish helping you." The growling got louder, but the girl did not try to move away. Her eyes stayed locked on Jake's face. The dark color in her cheeks got deeper. Jake worked slowly and carefully. He finished cleaning her cuts and wrapped them in clean bandages. When he touched her broken leg, she hissed like an angry cat, but she let him put a splint on it. Rain began to fall through the trees. Jake looked up at the dark clouds gathering above them. The girl was still too weak to move much. She needed shelter. "Can you walk?" Jake asked, making walking motions with his fingers. The girl tried to stand, but fell back down with a sharp cry of pain. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. When his arms went around her, the growling in her throat got much louder. But she was also blushing harder than before. The purple color spread down her neck and arms. Jake had never seen anything like it. He helped her lean against the fallen log while he gathered branches and leaves. The rain was getting heavier. Jake built a simple shelter against the log, making a dry space big enough for both of them. The girl watched everything he did. Her yellow eyes followed his every move. Sometimes she would make soft sounds in her language, almost like she was talking to herself. When the shelter was ready, Jake helped her crawl inside. She was shivering from cold and shock. Jake took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. The moment the jacket touched her, she made a sound Jake had never heard before. It was half growl and half something else, something that sounded almost happy. Her cheeks turned so dark they were nearly black. Jake sat at the other end of the small shelter, giving her space. He took out a food bar from his pack and broke it in half. He offered one piece to the girl. She sniffed it carefully, then took a tiny bite. Her face showed surprise. She ate the rest quickly, like she had not eaten in days. "What's your name?" Jake asked, pointing to himself. "Jake. I'm Jake." The girl tilted her head like a confused animal. Then she seemed to understand. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Kira. "Kira," Jake repeated. "That's a pretty name." When he said her name, Kira made that strange half-growling sound again. The blushing came back too, painting her cheeks dark purple. Outside their shelter, the rain poured down hard. Strange animal calls echoed through the jungle. But inside the small dry space, Jake and Kira sat in careful silence. Jake did not know that helping this strange girl would change everything. He did not know about the complex culture that made Kira confused and embarrassed by his kindness. He only knew that someone had been hurt, and he had done what felt right. As the night grew darker, Kira's breathing became easier. The bandages held, and the bleeding had stopped. She was still watching Jake with those glowing yellow eyes. Sometimes she would growl softly. Sometimes her cheeks would turn purple again. Jake started to think these might not be signs of anger. They seemed more like something else. Something he could not yet understand. The morning sun woke Jake slowly. He opened his eyes to find Kira staring at him from across their small shelter. She had not moved much during the night, but her yellow eyes were bright and alert. "Good morning," Jake said softly. Kira made a sound back that might have been a greeting. Then she tried to stand up. Pain shot through her broken leg, and she fell back down with a sharp hiss. Jake moved to help her, but Kira held up her hand to stop him. She tried again to stand by herself. This time she managed to get upright, but she was shaking from the effort. "You should rest more," Jake said, making sleeping motions with his hands. Kira shook her head hard. She pointed to herself, then made strong flexing motions with her arms. Jake understood she was trying to show him she was tough, but when she tried to take a step, her leg gave out. Jake caught her before she could fall. The moment his hands touched her arms, Kira went very still. The growling started again, low and rumbling in her throat. At the same time, her cheeks turned that dark purple color. She was blushing and growling at the same time. Jake did not understand why touching her caused both reactions. He helped her sit back down carefully. 3 hours later, Jake heard voices calling his name through the jungle. The rescue team had found them. Dr. Lisa Park pushed through the vines first, followed by 2 security officers. "Jake, thank goodness you're safe," Lisa said. Then she saw Kira and stopped walking. Oh my! Kira's reaction to the newcomers was immediate and fierce. She moved in front of Jake, putting herself between him and the strangers. A deep growl came from her throat, much louder than any sound she had made before. Her hands curled into claws. Her pointed ears lay flat against her head. Every muscle in her body tensed like she was ready to fight. "It's okay," Jake said quickly. "They're friends. They're here to help." But Kira did not understand his words. She only saw strange beings approaching the human who had helped her. Her protective instincts took over completely. Lisa held up her hands to show she was not armed. "Jake, what happened here?" Jake explained how he found Kira hurt and bleeding. As he talked, Lisa watched Kira carefully. The alien girl kept her eyes on the newcomers, but Jake noticed she was also listening to his voice. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered. "Jake, I think you've triggered something very complex here." "What do you mean?" Lisa pointed to how Kira was standing. Even with her hurt leg, she was positioned to defend Jake from any threat. In many species, protective behavior like this indicates pack bonding or mate selection, Lisa explained. But look at her body language. She's confused by her own reactions. It was true. Kira kept shifting between aggressive postures and something else. Sometimes she would touch the bandages Jake had put on her wounds. When she did this, the blushing would return to her cheeks. The security officers wanted to sedate Kira and take her back to the ship for study. Jake refused to let them. "She's not a specimen," he said firmly. "She's a person who got hurt." This argument continued for an hour. During this time, Kira watched Jake defend her to his own people. She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone of his voice. Something was changing in the way she looked at him. Lisa noticed it too. "Jake, she's studying you just as much as we're studying her." When the security team tried to approach Kira with a medical scanner, she hissed and showed her sharp teeth. But when Jake asked if he could scan her injuries, she sat still and let him do it. The scanner showed her leg was healing faster than human bones would. Her other injuries were also better than they should be after just one night. "Her people must have advanced healing abilities," Lisa said. "But Jake, we need to get her proper medical care." Jake translated this as best he could using hand signals. He pointed to Kira's leg, then to the sky where their ship waited. He tried to show that they wanted to help her get better. Kira's response surprised everyone. She grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him closer to her. Then she pointed to herself and shook her head firmly. She did not want to go to the ship. "I think she's afraid we'll separate her from you," Lisa said quietly. To test this theory, Lisa suggested that Jake walk away from Kira for a moment. The moment Jake took 3 steps back, Kira's distress was obvious. She made worried sounds in her throat. Her ears drooped. The blushing disappeared completely from her cheeks. She reached out toward Jake like she was trying to call him back. When Jake returned to her side, relief flooded her face. The purple color came back to her cheeks. She made that strange half-growling, half-happy sound again. "Fascinating," Lisa said. "She's formed an attachment to you incredibly quickly." Captain Ben Hayes contacted them by radio. He wanted the team back on the ship immediately. First contact protocols required careful study and documentation. "We can't just leave her here alone," Jake protested. "She's hurt, and something attacked her before. It might come back. Then we bring her with us," the captain decided. "But Jake, you stay away from her until we understand what's happening." This plan failed immediately. When the team tried to help Kira walk without Jake's assistance, she refused to move. She would only accept help from Jake himself, even more. Strangely, when other people got too close to Jake, Kira would position herself between them. She was protecting him just as much as seeking his protection. The journey back to the ship took 3 times longer than normal. Kira had to rest often because of her injuries. During these breaks, Jake noticed more of her strange behaviors. She would bring him small flowers she picked along the way. When he accepted them, she would blush and make pleased sounds. When he smiled at her, the blushing got even darker. But if anyone else tried to give her something, she would ignore them completely. "I've been thinking about her reactions," Lisa said during one rest stop. The growling, the blushing, the protective behavior. In her culture, these might all be connected. Connected how? What if accepting help is seen as weakness in her society? But what if showing strength to protect someone else is seen as attractive? Jake thought about this. You mean she's embarrassed that I helped her, but she's also drawn to the fact that I was willing to help? Exactly. She's caught between her cultural training and her personal feelings. As if to prove Lisa's point, Kira chose that moment to offer Jake another flower. When he took it and tucked it behind his ear, she made the loudest growl purr sound. Yet, her entire face turned purple with blushing. Then she seemed to realize what she was doing and looked embarrassed. She turned away and made annoyed sounds at herself. She likes you, Jake, Lisa said with a smile. But she doesn't know how to handle liking someone who helped her when she was weak. The rest of the walk to the ship was filled with these moments. Kira would do something that showed affection for Jake, then get embarrassed about it and growl at herself. Jake found it endearing, but he was also worried. What would happen when they reached the ship? Would Kira's people come looking for her? Did she even want to go back to them? Most importantly, what did her strange mix of growling and blushing really mean? Jake was starting to suspect it meant more than simple confusion. As they finally saw the ship through the trees, Kira stopped walking. She looked up at the metal structure with wide eyes. Then she looked at Jake with an expression he could not read. Whatever was going to happen next, Jake knew their simple rescue situation had become something much more complicated. Life on the ship became a daily adventure for Jake and Kira. 3 weeks had passed since they brought her aboard. Her broken leg had healed completely, much faster than human bones would mend. The cuts on her side were now just thin silver lines on her blue-scaled skin. But Kira refused to leave Jake's quarters. The ship's medical bay had perfectly good beds and advanced healing equipment. Kira had looked at it all with interest, then walked back to Jake's small room and made herself comfortable on his couch. She's claimed your space as her territory, Dr. Lisa Park explained to Jake. Many species do this when forming pair bonds. Pair bonds? Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Lisa smiled. Haven't you noticed how she acts around other crew members versus how she acts around you? Jake had noticed. When Chief Engineer Matt Rodriguez visited, Kira would sit up straight and watch him carefully. She was polite but distant. If Matt got too close to Jake, she would move between them with a soft growl. But when Jake came back to his room after work each day, Kira's whole face would light up. The purple blushing would start immediately. She would make happy chirping sounds and show him whatever she had been doing while he was gone. Today, she had been drawing. Jake's desk was covered with papers, filled with strange symbols and pictures. Kira had used his pens to create what looked like a mixture of art and writing. What's this? Jake asked, pointing to a drawing of 2 figures. Kira pointed to the smaller figure, then to herself. Then she pointed to the taller figure and touched Jake's arm. The picture showed them sitting together under stars. You drew us, Jake said with wonder. Kira's blushing got deeper. She nodded and made a pleased purring sound. Over the past weeks, they had developed their own way of talking. Jake had learned that different types of growls meant different things. A low rumbling growl meant she was content. A higher pitched growl meant she was worried. A very deep growl meant danger. The blushing was easier to understand. It happened whenever Jake did something kind for her. When he brought her food she liked. When he showed her how human technology worked. When he simply sat next to her and talked about his day. I think the blushing means she's happy, Jake told Lisa during one of their daily check-ins. But why does she growl at the same time? Have you considered that both reactions might be positive? Lisa suggested. Maybe growling is how her people show affection, and blushing is how they show attraction. The idea made Jake's heart beat faster. You really think she's attracted to me? Jake, yesterday she brought you a piece of metal she found in the engine room. When I asked Matt about it, he said it was a rare alloy worth a fortune on most worlds. She's bringing you treasure. It was true. Kira had developed a habit of giving Jake gifts. Sometimes they were flowers from the ship's garden. Sometimes they were shiny objects she found around the ship. Once she had somehow caught one of the ship's maintenance robots and presented it to him like a prize. In many cultures, gift-giving is part of courtship behavior, Lisa continued. Combined with the territorial behavior, the protective instincts, and the physical reactions. Jake, I think she's trying to court you. That evening, Jake returned to his quarters to find something new. Kira had rearranged all the furniture. His bed was now pushed against the wall, and his couch was positioned to face it. She had built what could only be described as a nest between them, using his spare blankets and pillows. Kira sat in the middle of her creation, looking very proud of herself. When she saw Jake, she patted the space next to her in the nest. This is very nice, Jake said, not sure how to react. Kira beamed at the praise. Then she pointed to the nest, to herself, and then to Jake. She made questioning sounds. You want us to share this space? Kira nodded eagerly. The blushing started again, painting her cheeks dark purple. But this time, the growling that came. With it sounded almost musical. Jake sat down carefully in the nest. It was actually quite comfortable. Kira immediately moved closer to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin. Kira, Jake said softly, I need to understand something. She looked at him with those bright yellow eyes, giving him her full attention. Jake pointed to her, then to himself, then made a gesture trying to indicate a question about the relationship. Kira seemed to understand what he was asking. She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she began to speak in her own language. Even though Jake could not understand the words, he could hear the emotion in her voice. She sounded sad at first, then angry, then hopeful. She pointed to herself and made strong, fierce gestures. Then she pointed to Jake and made gentle, caring motions. You're telling me about yourself, Jake realized. Kira nodded. She continued, talking, using more gestures to help explain. She showed him fighting motions, then pointed to scars on her arms that Jake had not noticed before. Old battle wounds. Then she made gestures that looked like she was being pushed away or rejected. Her voice became bitter when she did this. Your people rejected you, Jake said quietly. Kira's ears drooped. She nodded sadly. Then she pointed to Jake and made the caring gestures again. She touched the spot where her worst injury had been, the one Jake had bandaged. They rejected you for being caring, for being gentle. Another nod. Kira's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. That's terrible. There's nothing wrong with caring about others. Even though she could not understand all his words, Kira seemed to sense his support. The tears in her eyes spilled over, but she was smiling. She reached out and took Jake's hand in both of hers. Her skin was warm and slightly rough from the small scales. She brought his hand to her face and pressed it against her cheek. The purring sound she made was the loudest Jake had ever heard. Her blushing spread down her neck and arms. She closed her eyes and leaned into his touch like a cat seeking affection. You're not like them, Jake said softly. You're kind and gentle and brave. There's nothing wrong with you. Kira opened her eyes and looked at him. Even without understanding his exact words, she seemed to know what he meant. She made a sound that was part laugh and part sob. Then she did something that surprised Jake completely. She leaned forward and very gently touched her forehead to his. In her culture, it seemed to be a gesture of deep affection and trust. Jake stayed very still, letting her set the pace of their interaction. Her breathing was quick and nervous, but she did not pull away. When she finally sat back, her entire face was dark purple with blushing. The growling that came from her throat was so soft and musical, it sounded almost like singing. "I care about you too," Jake whispered. That night, they slept in Kira's nest with careful distance between them. But for the first time since coming aboard the ship, Kira did not have nightmares. She slept peacefully, making small content purring sounds. Jake lay awake longer, thinking about everything that had happened. Lisa was right. Kira was courting him in her own way. And if he was honest with himself, he was falling for her too. She was fierce and strong, but also gentle and caring. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien, but somehow perfectly right. Most importantly, she understood him in a way that felt deeper than language. The next morning brought a crisis that would test their growing bond. The ship's navigation systems failed completely. Without them, they were lost in space with no way to find their way home. Matt Rodriguez was in a panic. The magnetic field readings from this system are unlike anything we've ever seen. Our computers can't make sense of the data. That was when Kira surprised everyone. She had been exploring the ship for weeks, watching how everything worked. When she saw the navigation display showing confused error messages, she approached the control panel. "Wait," Matt said nervously. "We can't let her touch that. She might make it worse." But Kira was not touching the controls. Instead, she held her hands near the panel without making contact. Her eyes closed in concentration. Then she began to hum. The sound was low and melodic, almost like she was singing to the machine. As she hummed, something impossible happened. The navigation display began to clear up. The error messages disappeared one by one. "How is she doing that?" Matt breathed. Lisa was watching with fascination. "I think she can sense electromagnetic fields directly. She's helping the computer understand the local magnetic conditions." For 2 hours, Kira worked with the navigation system. She would hum different notes, and the displays would respond. Jake stayed by her side, bringing her water when she needed it, and making sure she did not get too tired. When she finally opened her eyes, the navigation system was working perfectly. "Incredible," Captain Hayes said over the intercom. "Miss Kira just saved our mission." Kira did not understand the words, but she understood that everyone was pleased with her work. She looked around at the smiling faces of the crew, then at Jake. Jake was looking at her with such pride and admiration that her blushing turned almost black. She made a happy trill and threw her arms around him. "Thank you," Jake said into her ear. "You saved us all." Kira pulled back to look at his face. Then she did something she had never done before. She tried to speak in English. "Jake," she said. Carefully, her accent made his name sound like music. Jake ... Good. It was the first English word she had ever spoken. Jake felt tears in his own eyes now. "Yes," he said, touching her face gently. "Kira good too." "Kira very good." The warning alarms woke everyone on the ship at 3 a.m. Jake jumped out of bed to find Kira already awake, her ears standing straight up as she listened to the sounds around them. "What's happening?" Jake asked, but Kira was already moving toward. The door. Captain Hayes' voice came over the intercom. "All crew to emergency stations. We have a massive storm system approaching. This is not a drill." Jake and Kira rushed to the bridge with everyone else. Through the main windows, they could see dark clouds spinning in a huge spiral that stretched across the entire sky. Lightning flashed inside the storm in colors Jake had never seen before. "How bad is it?" Jake asked Matt Rodriguez, who was working frantically at his controls. "Bad," Matt said without looking up. "This storm has electromagnetic effects that could fry every system on the ship, and it's moving too fast for us to escape. Dr. Lisa Park was studying her readings with a worried expression. The electromagnetic pulse from this storm will be like nothing our shields can handle. We need to shut down all non-essential systems and hope for the best. That won't be enough, Captain Hayes said grimly. Our atmospheric processors need to be manually recalibrated to handle the electromagnetic interference. Someone has to go outside during the storm to make the adjustments. Outside? Jake stared at the captain. In that storm? The processors are on the outer hull. Whoever goes out there will have to work in hurricane winds with lightning striking all around them. And they'll only have about 30 minutes before the electromagnetic pulse becomes lethal to human biology. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what the captain was really saying. This was a suicide mission. I'll do it, Jake said without hesitation. No. The word came from Kira, so loudly and fiercely that everyone jumped. She had been listening to the conversation, and even though she could not understand all the words, she understood that Jake was volunteering for something dangerous. Kira, it's okay. Jake tried to calm her. Someone has to do this, or we'll all die. But Kira was not listening. She moved to block the exit from the bridge, her whole body tense with protective fury. The growling that came from her throat was deeper and more threatening than any sound she had made before. She won't let you go, Lisa observed. Jake, I think she understands exactly what you're volunteering for. Kira began speaking rapidly in her own language. She pointed to Jake, then to herself, then made strong gestures with her arms. Even without translation, her meaning was clear. She was saying that if anyone was going out into that storm, it should be her, not Jake. Absolutely not, Jake said firmly. Kira, you're not even part of this crew. This isn't your responsibility. That was the wrong thing to say. Kira's eyes flashed with anger. She stepped closer to Jake and poked him in the chest while speaking forcefully in her language. Lisa was watching the exchange with fascination. I think she's arguing with you about who's stronger. What do you mean? Watch her body language. She's trying to prove she's the better choice for this mission. Kira was indeed flexing her muscles and pointing to her scars. She made fighting motions, then pointed to the storm outside. She was trying to show that she was a warrior who could handle dangerous situations. Jake shook his head. Kira, I won't let you risk your life for us. This made Kira even angrier. She made frustrated sounds and began pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Then she stopped and looked at Jake with an expression he had never seen before. She spoke in her language, but her tone was different now, sadder, more pleading. She touched her chest, then reached out to touch his. She was trying to tell him something important. I think, Lisa said quietly, she's trying to say that protecting you is important to her, maybe even more important than her own life. That's crazy, Jake protested. We barely know each other. But even as he said it, Jake knew it was not true. Over the past weeks, he and Kira had formed a connection that went deeper than language or species. She cared about him, and he cared about her. The thought of losing her was unbearable. The storm was getting closer. They could hear the wind beginning to howl around the ship. We're running out of time, Captain Hayes said. Someone needs to make a decision. That was when Kira did something unexpected. She walked over to the atmospheric processor controls and began studying them. She hummed softly, the same way she had when fixing the navigation system. She's trying to understand how the system works, Matt realized. Kira looked back and forth between the controls and the storm outside. Then she turned to Jake and spoke in a mixture of her language and the few English words she knew. Jake, together, she said carefully. Strong ... together. Understanding hit Jake like lightning. She wants us to work as a team. Lisa nodded excitedly. Of course. Jake has the technical knowledge, but Kira can sense electromagnetic fields. Together, they might be able to do what neither could accomplish alone. Captain Hayes considered this. It's still incredibly dangerous. You'll both be exposed to the storm. But we'll have a better chance of success, Jake said, and a better chance of both getting back alive. Kira seemed to understand the gist of the conversation. She moved to stand next to Jake and took his hand. The growling in her throat was soft now, almost musical. Her blushing had returned, painting her cheeks purple even in this tense situation. Kira. Jake ... together, she repeated. Then she added something in her own language that sounded like a promise. 20 minutes later, Jake and Kira stood in the airlock wearing protective suits. The suits were designed for humans, so Kira's had to be modified quickly to fit her different body shape. Remember, Matt's voice crackled through their helmets. You have 30 minutes maximum. After that, the electromagnetic pulse will overwhelm. The suit's protection. Through the airlock window, they could see the storm raging outside. The wind was so strong it was bending the ship's support struts. Lightning struck the ground every few seconds in brilliant flashes. Are you ready? Jake asked Kira. She looked at him through her helmet visor. Her yellow eyes were bright with determination. She squeezed his hand and nodded. The airlock opened, and they stepped out into chaos. The wind hit them immediately, trying to knock them off their feet. Jake had to grab onto the ship's hull to keep from being blown away. Kira moved more gracefully, her natural balance helping her navigate the storm. They made their way carefully along the hull toward the atmospheric processors. Each step was a battle against the wind. Lightning struck close enough that Jake could feel the heat through his suit. When they reached the processor controls, Jake began the technical work while Kira focused on sensing the electromagnetic patterns. Around them, the storm is interfering with the calibration. Jake shouted over the wind. I can't get a clear reading. Kira hummed louder, her hands moving in complex patterns near the controls. Slowly, the readings began to stabilize. They worked together like this for 25 minutes, with Jake handling the technical adjustments and Kira guiding him through the electromagnetic interference. It was like a dance they had rehearsed 100 times. Just as they finished the final calibration, disaster struck. A massive piece of debris broke off from a nearby tree and came flying straight at Jake. He never saw it coming. But Kira did. She threw herself at Jake, knocking him out of the way just as the debris crashed into the spot where he had been standing. But the force of her tackle sent them both tumbling toward the edge of the hull. Jake grabbed desperately for something to hold on to and caught Kira's hand just as she slipped over the edge. Now she was hanging in empty space with only Jake's grip keeping her from falling into the storm below. Hold on, Jake shouted, trying to pull her up. But the wind was too strong and the hull was too slippery. Jake could feel his own grip starting to slip. That was when Kira did something that amazed him. Instead of panicking, she used her free hand to point at something behind Jake. When he looked, he saw that her tackle had knocked him right next to a maintenance cable. Working together, they managed to get the cable around Kira's waist. Then Jake was able to pull her back up onto the hull. They made it back to the airlock with seconds to spare. As soon as the door sealed behind them, they collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. Are you hurt? Jake asked, pulling off his helmet. Kira removed her own helmet and shook her head. Then she looked at Jake with an expression he had never seen before. It was pride mixed with something deeper, something that looked very much like love. She reached out and touched his face gently. The growling that came from her throat was so soft it was almost a whisper. Her blushing was deeper than ever before. Jake, she said in her careful English. Jake ... brave, strong. So are you, Jake replied. You saved my life out there. Kira tilted her head, not understanding all the words. So Jake tried a different approach. He touched his chest, then hers, trying to show that they were connected, that they had saved each other. Understanding lit up her eyes. She made happy trilling sounds and threw her arms around him. Together, she said, using the English word she had learned. Strong together. Yes, Jake agreed, holding her close. Strong together. Later, as they sat in their quarters recovering from their ordeal, Jake realized something important had changed between them. They had faced death together and come through it as partners. The blushing end. 2 months had passed since the storm. The ship was finally ready to leave Kepler 442b and return to human space. But Jake felt like his heart was being torn in two. Kira had learned enough English to have simple conversations. She understood that the ship would soon leave her planet forever. What she did not understand was why Jake looked so sad about it. Jake sad, she said one evening as they sat together in their quarters. Why Jake sad? Jake had been dreading this conversation. Kira, we have to talk about what happens when the ship leaves. Kira tilted her head, her ears perking up with curiosity. Ship leaves? Yes, we go back to our home, to Earth. Jake pointed up toward the ceiling, trying to indicate traveling far away. Jake goes home, Kira repeated slowly. Then understanding dawned in her yellow eyes. Kira not go with Jake? The pain in her voice made Jake's chest ache. Kira, there are rules, laws. When humans meet new people like you, we're supposed to leave them on their home planet. Kira was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then she asked, Jake wants Kira to come? Yes, Jake said without hesitation. More than anything. But I don't know if it's allowed. That night, Kira did not sleep. Jake found her, sitting by the window, looking out at the jungle where he had first found her. Her shoulders shook slightly, and Jake realized she was crying. Kira? He sat down next to her. She wiped her eyes and tried to smile, but it did not fool him. Kira, understand, Jake has to go home. I don't want to leave you. Kira knows. She touched his face gently. But Jake's people need Jake. Jake helps people. Is good thing. Her acceptance of the situation made Jake feel even worse. She was willing to let him go because she thought it was best for him, even though it would break her heart. The next morning, Jake made a decision that surprised everyone. He went to Captain Hayes and formally requested asylum for Kira. Asylum? The captain raised his eyebrows. Jake, she's not a refugee. This is her home planet. No, it's not, Jake said firmly. She told me her people exiled her for showing mercy. In battle, she has no clan, no family, no place in her society. She's alone here. Dr. Lisa Park supported Jake's request. Captain, I've been studying Kira's interactions with the crew. She's formed social bonds with us, especially with Jake. Forcing her to stay here alone would be cruel. And what about first contact protocols? Captain Hayes asked. We can't just take aliens back to human space whenever we feel like it. Sir, Jake said carefully, the protocols don't say anything about voluntary requests for asylum. Kira isn't being taken against her will. She wants to come with us. The captain considered this for several days. During that time, other crew members came forward to support Kira's request. Matt Rodriguez said she had skills that could be valuable to human technology development. The security team admitted she had never been a threat to anyone, but it was Chief Medical Officer Dr. Amy Foster who provided the strongest argument. Captain, Kira saved this ship and everyone on it when she helped fix our navigation and weather systems. She's risked her life for us multiple times. Don't we owe her the same consideration she's shown us? On the 5th day, Captain Hayes called Jake and Kira to his office. "I've made my decision," he said. "Kira, if you truly want to come with us, I'll approve your asylum request. But you need to understand that you might never be able to return to this planet." Kira looked at Jake, then back at the captain. "Kira understands. Kira wants to go with Jake and friends. There's one condition," the captain continued. "First, you must return to your people and formally request to leave. We won't take anyone who hasn't said goodbye properly." Jake's heart sank. "Captain, her people exiled her. They might not even let her speak to them, and that's a risk she'll have to take." Kira listened to this exchange with growing understanding. When she realized what the captain was asking, she stood up straighter. "Kira will go to Clan," she said with determination. "Kira will tell them about Jake's people. Tell them mercy makes strong, not weak." "Kira, that's dangerous," Jake protested. "What if they hurt you?" Kira's eyes flashed with the old fierce spirit Jake remembered from their first meeting. Kira not afraid. Kira learned new things. Kira wants to teach Clan. 3 days later, Jake and a small team accompanied Kira into the deep jungle where her people lived. The journey took 2 days of walking through difficult terrain. When they finally reached the Vithani settlement, Jake was amazed by what he saw. The buildings were built high in the trees, connected by bridges and platforms. Everything was designed for people who could climb and jump like cats. Kira's return caused quite a stir. Her former clan members gathered around, speaking rapidly. In their musical language, some seemed angry. Others appeared curious about the strange humans who had come with her. The clan leader was a tall female with silver blue skin and scars covering her arms. She spoke to Kira in a voice that sounded both stern and questioning. Kira responded with confidence, gesturing toward Jake and the other humans. She spoke for a long time, occasionally pointing to her own healed scars or making demonstrations of the technologies she had learned about. Jake could not understand the words, but he could see the reaction of the crowd. Some looked skeptical, others seemed intrigued. A few appeared downright amazed. Then Kira did something that surprised everyone. She walked over to Jake and took his hand in front of her entire clan. The purple blushing covered her cheeks as she spoke in a clear, proud voice. "What is she saying?" Jake whispered to Lisa, who had been trying to learn the Vithani language. "I think," Lisa said slowly, "she's telling them that humans have taught her a new kind of strength. The strength to care for others and work together." The clan leader looked at Jake with intense yellow eyes. She spoke a few words to Kira, who nodded and responded. "She's asking if you'll protect Kira," Lisa translated. "Always," Jake said, looking directly at the clan leader, even though she could not understand his words. But Kira translated his response, and something in the clan leader's expression softened. She spoke again, this time sounding less stern. She says that Kira has found a worthy mate," Lisa said with surprise, "and that the clan gives their blessing for her to leave with him." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The entire clan gathered to say goodbye to Kira and to formally recognize her bond with Jake. They painted symbols on both of their faces with colored mud. Kira explained later that the symbols meant bonded across the stars and protected by courage. When it was time to leave, many of Kira's former clan members came forward to touch her hands and speak words of farewell. Some even nodded respectfully to Jake, acknowledging him as Kira's chosen partner. The clan leader gave Kira a necklace made of small blue stones. "For remembering home," she said in carefully pronounced English as they walked back toward the ship. Kira was unusually quiet. Jake worried that she was having second thoughts about leaving. "Are you okay?" he asked. Kira looked back toward the trees where her people lived, then at Jake. "Kira is happy," she said. "Clan understands now. Mercy and caring make strong bonds. Make stronger than fighting alone. So you're not sad to leave? Kira stopped walking and took both of Jake's hands in hers. The growling that came from her throat was soft and musical. Her blushing painted her cheeks the deepest purple Jake had ever seen. Kira's home is with Jake now, she said clearly. Where Jake goes, Kira goes. 6 months later, the ship New Horizons docked at Luna Station, humanity's largest spaceport. Kira stood at the observation window, staring in wonder at the massive structure filled with ships from dozens of human worlds. It's beautiful, she said in English that had improved dramatically during their journey. Jake stood beside her, still amazed by how much she had grown and learned. Kira was no longer the confused, injured girl he had found in the jungle. She was confident, intelligent, and had become an invaluable member of their crew. More importantly, she had become the most important person in Jake's life. Kira, Jake said nervously, "There's something I want to ask you." She turned to look at him with those bright yellow eyes. Yes? Jake had been practicing this speech for weeks, but now his mouth felt dry. You know I care about you very much. Jake cares for Kira. Kira cares for Jake, she agreed with a smile. Would you ... Would you want to stay with me? Permanently? As my partner? Kira tilted her head, considering the words. Partner means ... like mates? Yes, like mates. The blushing that spread across Kira's face was so intense it was almost black. The purring sound she made was loud enough that other crew members looked over with smiles. Yes, she said simply. Kira wants to be Jake's mate, forever. She threw her arms around him and held him close. The happy sounds she made were a mixture of purring, growling, and something that might have been laughter. I love you, Kira, Jake whispered. Love, she repeated thoughtfully. Good word. Kira loves Jake too. As their ship docked and they prepared to start their new life together, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. He had tried to help an injured stranger and ended up finding his soulmate. Kira had taught him that love could exist between any two beings who cared enough to understand each other. Species, culture, even language barriers could be overcome with patience and genuine affection. And Kira? She had learned that accepting help was not weakness, and